Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, Booked with Juby. It is that time of the month again, and I am wrapping up everything that I read in September 2025, and it was a good reading month. I enjoyed most of the books. There's one I did not, and I will get into that later. But for now, let's talk about all the books that I read and listened to in September. Okay, so the first book we're going to talk about is Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. Now, I have read The Unmaking of June Farrow by her, which I loved that book so much. This one I enjoyed as well, but I did enjoy that one a little more. If you are looking for a moody, atmospheric read, this one is for you, especially if you're looking for fall vibes. This one has, it's got the spookiness, it has the fall leaves, it has pumpkins, it's got just witchy craft, like just all the vibes you need for fall, which is one of the reasons I picked it for September. But this book basically follows Emery Blackwood, whose life was basically upended years ago when her best friend was murdered and her old love, August Salt, was the accused. And years later, he has returned to the island to spread his mother's ashes, and all of a sudden, all the old secrets of the island are coming back to surface, and you got really weird characters. This is a small town that doesn't like outsiders. Everyone always thought it was August Salt, but they could never prove it was him that had killed her best friend. And, Emery could never quite believe that he had done that, but he abandoned her and left her. And, so it's got heartbreak and an unsolved murder. And then there's also a little aspect of witchcraft throughout the book, because Emery's family and the island kind of have their own different magic that they kind of incorporate throughout the book. And honestly, this was definitely a slow burn mystery. It was not a fast-paced novel by any means, but she really does do a good job of creating the atmosphere and making you really feel like you're in that time of year. And it's based on this island, Cherche Island. I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but either way, it's like a spooky island where, these characters, a lot in such a small town, you think you know everyone, but do you really? Overall, I would give this book a 3.5 out of 5. I enjoyed it a lot. I do wish that she had, maybe elaborated a little bit more on the witchcraft and the magic, because I know this is not a fantasy by any means. This is magical realism, romance, mystery novel. It's kind of genre blending. But either way, I do wish she had talked a little bit more about the witchcraft. I thought that was the aspect she did put in there. I was like, oh, so interesting. But then she kind of would get away from it. And I thought if she had put it throughout the story a little bit more and made it more of a focal point, I would have enjoyed it just a little bit more. The next book I read in September was My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This was the first book I've ever read by her, and I really enjoyed it a lot. It was a lot different than I expected. It was an interesting and wild read. Essentially, you're following a couple who seem to live like a very normal life in the suburbs. They're always trying to get ahead, try and keep up with the Jones type people. They go to the country club and that type of thing. They want to be better. They want to be part of the better society. And to keep their marriage exciting, they secretly murder people. Yeah, you heard me right. They murder people as a couple. So it's their hobby, and the whole story is told from the husband's point of view. And it's really interesting because in this book, typically when we think of serial killers or murderers, we think of men, typically. But this book is, the wife is really the catalyst here. She's the one pulling the moves, making all the stuff. But you do see it through his point of view when he's talking about her and what happens. And I think what makes this book so good is that they, on the outside, seem very ordinary, like just a normal family, but with 2 kids, the house, whatever. And this one, I flew through it. It was so good. Now, I will say the beginning really had me hooked. I was a smidge bored in the middle, but by the end it picked up again, and I was like super into it, and I wanted to know what was going on, and it had some good twists. I would rate this one a 4 out of 5, and I definitely think if you like serial killer books, this one is definitely for you. Okay, the next 2 books I read were the duology The Shepherd King by Rachel Gillig, which is One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. Now I'm going to talk about these together just because I don't want to spoil anything by getting into book 2 too much. But basically, this is a fantasy duology. So if you are looking to get into fantasy, but you don't want to read something like Throne of Glass or, I don't know, anything that's like a huge series and requires a lot of reading and you're a little nervous to do that many books with that many pages, this is a perfect one to dip your toe in because it's a dark fantasy and they're pretty quick reads. They're not too big. I think they're about 400 pages. A little over 400, under 500 each. Anyway, they're really cool. Basically, you are introduced to this character, Elspeth, and she has been cursed with a monster that is living in her head. And basically, you follow her story on how she and the monster kind of become one, and the characters around them are trying to stop this curse from taking over their whole town. This story gave me, this is really weird, but it gave me Snow White vibes, even though it has nothing to do with Snow White. It's just like the time period, the land, the castles, the type of characters. It just screamed Snow White to me for some reason. And I also would say this is a good book to read in the fall because it's definitely like heading into that time of year and it's spooky. It has a lot to do with trees, which is a very interesting part of it. And then also the magic system's really neat in this. It's basically based on cards and each card has different powers. At first I wasn't sure if that was like a little cheesy, but truthfully once I like understood it and what the cards did and what they meant, I was really into it and I thought it was a very interesting, neat card system and a magic system that they were using. So again, if you're looking for a way to dip your toe into fantasy, this is a great one to start. It is dark though. It's a lot darker than some of the other fantasies, but it was very interesting story. And you do get your little romance in there. You get a little mystery. You get fantasy. It's a little bit genre blending in that way. And overall, I would rate these 4 to 5 stars. I enjoyed both of them so much. I actually liked book 2 a lot more, and it ended really well in my opinion. The next book I read was Wildcard by Elsie Silver. Now this one actually wasn't on my TBR for September. I kind of got off of the TBR a little bit, only because this one was a newly released September book and I had read the other books in the series, which is the Rose Hill series, and this is the 4th and final book, which is Wildcard. And of course I couldn't not go buy it because I love the other 3 so much and I had to read it immediately. If you haven't read the Rose Hill series, you don't have to read them in any particular order. There is an order you can read them, which is publication. And I would suggest doing that just because the characters do, you know, make appearances in the other books, but they're not essential to the story. So it doesn't matter. Like if you just read this one, it won't not make sense or it won't ruin it seeing the other characters. It's just, you know, it just creates the world a little bit more, if that makes sense. But essentially, this one was like super messy, but in the best way. You follow Gwen and Bash, who had met in an airport after being stranded there for a snowstorm about a year prior. And then they had instant chemistry. You know, they really were vibing off each other, had a great time, and they promised to stay in touch, but something happens and they weren't able to stay in touch. A year later, Bash is newly introduced to his son that he didn't know about, and now it turns out that Gwen is dating his son. So he's a little devastated, obviously, and I know it sounds really weird because you're like, oh my god, she's dating her ex's son or her boyfriend's dad. Like, it's just messy. It's weird, okay? And at first I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be weird. But no, Elsie does a really good job of writing it, so it's not creepy, it's not weird, and it's not such a huge age gap that it's like, what the heck, how can you date both of them? Honestly, these two have really good chemistry, Gwen and Bash. You know, he's your typical grumpy firefighter pilot, and then she's like this happy yoga girly who's just like, she knows what she wants and isn't afraid to go after it. And I really enjoyed the whole book. I read it up really quickly. Now just keep in mind with Elsie Silver, she is a spicy content girly, so if you're not into spicy, you might not like these series. Now it's not too spicy, but it is spicy, so you know, I tend to, that's about as spicy as I like. I don't like it any further than that personally, but I really love a quick little rom-com romancy type of vibe book like this. It's such a good palate cleanser, and you can read these ones so quickly. I think I read this in like a day and a half, maybe 2, because I was just enjoying it so much, and you could just fly through them. So overall, I would definitely rate this one a 4 out of 5. I loved every single book in the series so far, and I can't wait to read more Elsie Silver. Okay, the last book I read in September was The Teacher by Freida McFadden. Now, Freida books, I always use these as like quick palate cleansers because they are what I like to call fun thrillers. They are very easy reads. They have good twists, and you can easily like read these and binge them very quickly. They're usually not too long either, which is nice. Now, this one, I'm going to be very transparent with you. I didn't like it. I usually like her books. Like, they're not like 5 out of 5 reads for me, truthfully. But you know, again, I like them for what they are. You go in knowing what you're getting with a Freida book, and that's what I love about it. This one I thought I would like, but maybe I should have like figured it out, I guess, earlier, because it's called The Teacher. But it gave me ick. It made me icked out. I actually said ew out loud like multiple times, and I almost should have DNF'd it, truthfully, but I finished it because I wanted to know what the twist was, which also, like, everything, I don't know, just the thing, it icked me out. Basically, this book is told from 2 perspectives. You have Eve, who's one of the teachers, and then Addie, who is a 16-year-old student, a troubled student with a dark past. Addie becomes way too close with Eve's husband, who is also a teacher, and if you catch my drift where that's going, creeper, no thank you. I didn't love that dynamic of the book. I mean, it's very obvious that's coming. That doesn't ruin the book. Like, it's very clear, like, that's what's going to happen. But I guess I just didn't expect it to be, like, so talked about. And it just, I don't know, it icked me out. So sorry, but this one is not for me. I gave it a 2 out of 5, truthfully, because the twist at the end I didn't see coming. But I can't rightfully give this a higher rating when I was so icked out. I don't know. Did any of you read this and like it? Totally to each their own. But for me, it wasn't for me. Okay, let's talk about the 2 audiobooks that I listened to in September. The first one is We All Live Here by Jojo Moyes, and I really enjoyed this one. This one is very emotional and messy, but in all the best ways. Essentially, you're following Lila, who is juggling a broken marriage. Her husband had left her for another parent in the neighborhood, and she has 2 daughters. Her house is kind of falling apart, and she has her elderly stepfather living with her. And then all of a sudden, 35 years later, her estranged father shows up, and now all of them are all living under this roof, and it's crazy and hectic, and it's a good family dynamic book. It had a lot of, you know, complicated family relationships, second chances, and, you know, kind of redefining what love and what family looks like. It really gave me like what a modern family might look like in today's setting. And I thought this book would make such a good TV show, truthfully, because you have some really quirky characters. It's set in England as well. And I don't know, everyone just has a lot of growth. The kids even, like, you get the point of view of mostly Lila and then sometimes her daughter, the older one, and, you know, her struggles, and then her father's struggles, and honestly it all blended together, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It's also got some really good one-liners in it. I thought it was really funny, and I really enjoyed it. So overall, I think I'd rate like a 3.75, like almost a 4 out of 5, just because of how much I enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read more of hers. All right, the last audiobook I listened to was Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. This one hooked me right away. Basically, you follow Gio and Kaiser, and they are kind of estranged best friends. 14 years prior, Gio basically helped cover up the murder of her best friend Angela with her crime committing boyfriend who turns out to be a serial killer named Kelvin. And she goes to prison for 5 years, and that's sort of where we start the novel off, is where she, you know, he got caught, she got caught. She goes to jail for 5 years because she didn't actually murder Angela, but she knew and covered it up. She's also 16 at the time, so there's a lot of stuff going on there. You see her go to prison and then get out of prison, and then Kaiser, who is also her best friend from high school, he actually is the cop that brought Kelvin in and her in. So he's trying to solve the murder mystery of his other best friend, Angela. And the three of them have this weird, crazy dynamic from high school. And even in the future, you know, you get a lot of character growth in this one. And it's interesting because you have different POVs. You have Kaisers, you have Geos, and you have, you know, this like right versus wrong, and it's really tricky and where the gray area lies. And overall, it was a really interesting story. Now, I will give you a heads up. This one had some very disturbing scenes in it. So if you are not into that, if you don't want something so literal and very like a little disturbing, then maybe skip this one, because she does go into detail about some of the murders, and they're pretty gross and disturbing. Like, I can't think of a better word for this other than it was disturbing. I really enjoyed the whole book, and the twists were really good, and I really had a good time listening to it. I really like constantly was like excited to put it on, and you know it's a good audiobook when you're like, oh, I want to put it on, I want to listen to it. So overall, really enjoyed this one. I think I also would have enjoyed reading this one, which sometimes it's like clearly an audiobook versus clearly a physical book. This one I think I could have done either way and really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5, and I recommend this one if you really like a fast-paced thriller with a little bit more complex characters and a little bit more dynamic family relationships, a little more in-depth conversation, if that makes sense. All right, friends, that's everything I read and listened to in September. Have you read or listened to any of the books that I talked about today, or are they on your TBR? Let me know in the comments. What did you think about the books, and do you have any book suggestions for me? I'm always looking for more book recommendations. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching. If you aren't already subscribed, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and maybe hit a like as well. It goes such a long way for me, and I really appreciate it. I love you all so, so, so much. I'm here on YouTube once a week. I'm also on Shorts and Instagram and TikTok, Booked with Julie. I love you all so much. Bye.